My neighbor's daughter said, the landlord keeps stopping by when my parents are at work to check things that don't seem broken. Lily Chen knocked on my apartment door at 3:45 on a Wednesday afternoon, still wearing her high school backpack, her face showing that particular teenage expression of uncertainty mixed with determination. I was working from home that day, reviewing architectural plans for a commercial renovation project when I heard her knock. She stood in the hallway of our building, fidgeting with her phone case. The 15-year-old from apartment 3B rarely spoke to me beyond polite hellos in the elevator. Her presence at my door was unusual enough that I knew immediately something was wrong. Mr. Dalton, can I ask you something? It's about Mr. Brennan, our landlord. Her voice was quiet, but steady. I stepped back from the doorway and gestured for her to come inside, leaving the door open because I understood how a teenage girl might feel about entering a neighbor's apartment alone. Of course, what's going on? She stayed near the door, gripping her backpack straps. The landlord keeps stopping by when my parents are at work to check things that don't seem broken. He came yesterday to look at the bathroom faucet, but it works fine. Last week he checked the smoke detectors even though we just had the building inspection. 2 weeks before that, he said he needed to verify the heating vents before winter. My parents work until 6, and he always comes between 3:30 and 5. He knows my schedule. He knows when I'm home alone. My stomach tightened with that immediate recognition of danger that comes from instinct before conscious thought catches up. I'd been living in this converted warehouse building for 6 years, long enough to know Stephen Brennan's patterns. He was meticulous about maintenance requests, often annoyingly so, but his visits were always scheduled during business hours when tenants were home or had given explicit permission for entry. The idea of him repeatedly accessing an apartment when only a teenager was present set off every warning signal I'd developed from years of reading case studies about predatory behavior. I'd been an architect specializing in institutional buildings, schools, youth centers, places where safety protocols were critical. How many times has this happened? I asked, keeping my voice level and non-alarming. Lily pulled out her phone and opened a notes app. I started writing it down after the third time because it felt weird. 12 visits in the past 2 months, always between 3:30 and 5:15, always when mom and dad are at work. He has legitimate reasons every time. Checking the water pressure, inspecting the windows, looking at electrical outlets, testing the thermostat, but nothing ever needs fixing. He never actually repairs anything. 12 visits in 8 weeks. That wasn't maintenance. That was surveillance establishing a pattern of access, normalizing his presence in the apartment while she was alone, testing boundaries to see if she'd question his authority or accept his explanations. Classic grooming behavior disguised as landlord responsibilities. Does he just check whatever he says he's there to inspect and then leave? I asked. Lily shook her head and her grip on her backpack straps tightened. He talks to me, asks about school, about my friends, about my plans for college. He knows I want to study art. Last week he said he has a friend who's a photographer who could help me build a portfolio. He said professional photos would help with college applications. He asked if I'd be interested in doing a photo session at his studio space. I didn't even know he had a studio space. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I'd heard this pattern before in the safety seminars I'd attended for youth facility design. The excessive interest, the offers of special opportunities, the private sessions away from protective adults. This wasn't a landlord being friendly with a tenant. This was calculated predation. Did you tell your parents about these visits? I asked. She looked down at her shoes. I mentioned it once. Mom said Mr. Brennan is just being thorough with building maintenance. Dad said we're lucky to have a landlord who actually cares about keeping things in good condition instead of ignoring problems. They don't see it as weird because he's the landlord. He's supposed to have access to our apartment. He's supposed to check on things. When I said it made me uncomfortable, Dad said I was being paranoid and that I should be grateful someone's looking out for the property. I tried to explain that nothing's actually broken, but Mom said preventive maintenance is smart. They trust him completely. This was the most dangerous part. The predator had institutional authority that made his access seem legitimate. Parents saw him as responsible rather than suspicious. A landlord checking on his property wasn't alarming to adults who didn't understand the pattern. Lily was isolated in her discomfort, her instincts telling her something was wrong while the adults in her life dismissed her concerns as teenage paranoia. I'd seen this dynamic in case studies. Predators deliberately chose roles that gave them authorized access to children and teenagers, then used that authority to silence victims who tried to report concerning behavior. Lily, I'm glad you came to me. Your instincts are right. This isn't normal landlord behavior. Have you ever been alone with him outside your apartment? I needed to know if Brennan had already escalated beyond the apartment visits. She shook her head quickly. No, but what she said next made my blood boil. Full story is linked below or on my channel.